Okay. Okay. It's working. Oh. It's fine. Yep. Ow. It's fine. Hi, and Zizaran here with another League starter for 3.17, and this is a collab with Pohx, Master of the Righteous Fire, and something he's been playing for a very, very long time. And when I was talking to him, he was like, pretty much the only thing I can play is this, don't ask me about anything else. So if you're looking to play Righteous Fire Inquisitor for League Start, this is going to be a really, really solid choice. And we'll talk a little bit about the limitations of the build, etc. So for things like the Feared, etc., this is not the best choice. It should be able to do most of, like, you know, easier bosses, especially on softcore. So things like Maven, etc. won't be like the end of the world, but the Feared, etc. will be kind of hard on this build. On hardcore, this is not what we would recommend as a boss killer. It absolutely is doable as a hardcore build, but especially some of the endgame switches, you can be a little bit more vulnerable, and it doesn't have a stacked defense as some of the other builds. Especially a downside to Maven is the degen beam. The fight will be over quickly. Other than that, Righteous Fire is really, really fun, and this is a really good build for those that have wrist problems or anything like that. You can get away with very little clicking. We do have a secondary ability like either Scorching Ray or Flame Wall, but this is a build you could get around with just using Righteous Fire if you're missing a limb or you have like arm problems or anything like that. This is a great choice for that. So as normal, we are using our step-by-step leveling process for the skill tree, and you can see like ascendancy points being taken as we level. And in our skills, we have a leveling process here. So you start out with normally either Freezing Pulse or Magma Orb, and you can use Flame Wall as well. You shoot projectiles through the Flame Wall, they will gain damage. And then 12 to 55, you're using Wintertide Brand / Vortex. And at level 55, you can do the switch to Righteous Fire. And the key here for the switch is basically getting Pious Path. This effectively doubles your regen and easily lets you sustain your Righteous Fire early. Obviously, you really want to make sure you have 75 Fire Rest ++ here. And at the end game, we're going to have quite a lot more than that. So especially early on, you can use Scorching Ray, and then later you can switch to Flame Wall. So you have some choice here. And in the items, there are early level things, mid-game things, etc. So you can check all different ones. And even the endgame set shouldn't be like too crazy, and you have nice items to progress towards. In the notes, there are loads of like questions answered here, and Pohx is using this as his League starter. So if you have any questions, you can drop by Pohx's Twitch and ask him any questions. There is nothing he won't be able to solve for this build. So for this build, Righteous Fire rocks around a total of 1.5 million DPS at the end game, and it has a really, really nice tank. You can see that we have, even with Righteous Fire up, a pretty hefty regen. Also, we have insane amounts of armor. We can get up to 47,000 with a Granite Flask up. So that means that we're going to have a really beefy really beefy Molten Shell. And obviously we have very high max res as well. So it is really, really nice. And in the calcs, it will actually have slightly more damage than that. We haven't turned on a lot of conditional things like Scorched Ground, or is the enemy ignited or covered in ash, which will actually happen. And the bandits for this build, you kill them all. You just want the skill points. And the Pantheon, yes, like it says in the PoB, is the Lunaris and Garakan.
So all you're going to have to do with this build is enter your map, press your Righteous Fire key, and then simply move in the direction you want monsters to die in. If they're too tanky and they're not dying quickly, don't forget to use your secondary skill, which is going to be Flame Wall or Scorching Ray. When you come across the map boss, if it's doing a lot of damage to you, don't also forget to use your Enduring Cry, because that's a huge health boost to your character. So here's the map boss.
And now let's do a little Q&A that we do at the end of each build, and we'll actually have Pohx answering the questions. So, Pohx, are there too many gems to equip in this build? What is the socket pressure like?
So socket pressure is pretty heavy because you've got a 6-link dedicated for one main gem, and then you have a 4-link dedicated for another 4-link for your auras. But other than that, you should still have space for like your Flame Dash all the time, your secondary movement skill like Shield Charge, and then you usually have 1 to 2 gems free for Enduring Cry, Infernal Cry. In this exact setup, you have about 1 gem free if you don't want to use Enduring Cry and Infernal Cry.
Awesome. And if anyone is wondering why we're using both Flame Dash and Shield Charge is generally a lot faster, but then they can't go over anything. So we use Flame Dash to go over objects or through fences. So Pohx, what about mana issues? Does this build even use mana?
Not really. During the leveling stages, you may notice some form of issue, but you have a mana flask usually during the stages. Once you get into mapping, your main gem doesn't take any mana, and your secondary skill is going to be life tap. Your movement skills are life tap. Pretty much everything is life tap. Build also works without an enlighten.
Oh, that's awesome. What about useful level uniques? Anything crazy for the early game that can help you?
Ash collars are pretty good for damage. They are a low source or a very low level item with a large source of fire multiplier. And then any form of life regen uniques, if you want to get Righteous Fire running earlier, Rise of the Phoenix is very good, but that's a little bit later. You've got Ikizuru rings that are giving you life regen per level. So things like that.
So what kind of quality of life and defense? Like, talk us a little bit through the defenses and like recovery of the build. How does that work?
Sure. So you're stacking pretty high sources of armor, just, typical running determination. You have a granite flask on at all times, since whenever you get hit, you gain charges. Furthermore, you've got a very high effective life pool. So we're sitting at about like roughly between 5,000 life, maybe a little higher, a little bit lower, but then also 3,000 plus energy shield. That's stacked from all the life gained as extra energy shield. From there, you have your insane recovery because of Pious Path. So your life regen adds to your energy shield. That means your Enduring Cry also scales off that. So instead of it just healing 3,000 life, it's 3,000 life and 3,000 energy shield. From there, you've got pretty high fire res. Your max fire res is usually between 83 to 85, maybe even higher, depending on how far you go. 78 cold and lightning, but you have a very high effective life towards it. And then you've got Molten Shell on top of that, which is another very large buffer.
What would you say are the downsides of this build?
I would say some of the downsides is when you're trying to push it into red tier maps and or just start getting faster boss kills, it can start to get quite a bit expensive. Sadly, there's not a very good way to craft your weapon. You're pretty much fossil spamming and or harvest spamming for your weapon, and that's a large source of damage. Other than that, it's not too big of a deal. It can kind of suck when you see like a Legion or even like a Blight that spawns and there's like 1 in 4 different directions, and you don't have the damage to like clear it fast enough. But we do have variants for that, like Explode variant. That's a bit more down the line, but it can be modified to do most things. It just costs a lot more currency.
So this is a great choice for 3.17, especially if you like Righteous Fire. And thank you so much for Pohx for joining me in this collab. Make sure you check out his Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Pohx, and we'll link it everywhere as well. And looking forward to doing more stuff like this in the future. So check him out. Sub if you liked the video. But more importantly, try to die less than I do.